something that I have noticed in observing you in preparation for this podcast, you're incredibly sweet. And like, it's very interesting that a lot of it, when I watch the videos, particularly the videos you do on YouTube, it's very, direct, and it's very, like you're gazing in, it's like, this is the path, this is what we do. It's like you're leading the ship. You're like the front of the spear.
Yeah.
And then outside of that, you have like a ton of this really sweet, jubilant, like little girl energy. It's really cool.
Okay, good.
How does that?
A lot of people don't like that about me, actually.
Which part?
The fact that I have both elements. It's like I have a game face, kind of. It's not, I mean, both sides are like very authentic aspects of me.
Totally.
But it's like people either like one or the other usually, and they don't have a very easy time holding dichotomy, I've noticed.
How's your experience with other people noticing you?
I enjoy it when they do, finally, because I absolutely lack being understood in every way.
Mm. How long has that been? How long have you experienced that as being a part of your narratives, experience,
Since
objective reality, subjective reality?
Damn planet.
How's that been?
Not good.
In what way?
I struggle with this time-space reality. I have
Since
a lot of...
as long as you can remember?
Oh yeah, as long as I can remember.
What was the earliest memories of struggling with this time-space reality?
Being in my mother's stomach. She had a different Rh blood factor, and so her body was attacking mine from moment one.
Whoa.
It's not fun to remember being in the uterus, I'll tell you what. I remember all kinds of things. Noises, the ways that she was feeling, conversations that were had, all kinds of things.
How does one tap into those memories, and is it valuable to be able to tap into those memories if one can?
In doing trauma work with people, I have noticed that a great many people have the capacity to access these types of memories through specifically what triggers that come up in their adult life. But as far as developing the capacity to remember that far as almost like a talent, I would be the last person on earth to ask because I never had to try.
Hmm. With trauma is a word that gets thrown around a lot. Like, how do you define trauma with a person? Because I think it's become very popularized, and then there's also the potential of identifying with trauma and one's victimhood as kind of like a badge to move through life, like leveraging victimhood as a tool and holding on to the trauma, and like, who would I be without the trauma? Because there can be great benefit in holding on to that for a person. And, I feel like I've heard the word trauma more in the last 4 years than I have in my entire life. It's like, what is trauma? How do we actually define trauma?
Trauma is distress without resolve.
Hmm.
And because there's no resolve brought to the distress, it stays distressed.
How does that imprint the body during the time of? Like, what happens in one's consciousness, one's physiology, one's spirit, if that's an appropriate word?
It is. The most important thing to understand is that in the moment of trauma, a fragmentation occurs. And that fragmentation applies to many different levels. The first level is that an aspect of the self essentially stays embedded in the past. Mm-hmm. It's like a skipping CD, right?
Yeah.
The second level is that we want to cope with whatever we can't find resolve from. So let's say that you're 4 years old. Let's say dad leaves the family, right? Mom has to go take a second job, is no longer available. We're living in a society where there's nobody else to watch us, right? We have to develop very quickly some kind of a resource that keeps us safe. So let's say that resource is something like hyper-independence. Mm. We deny, suppress, and disown any aspect of ourself that feels those almost like vulnerable attachment needs. And we hyper-identify with the opposite aspect. And so what we're causing is a fragmentation within our personality spectrum. And that can happen over and over and over and over again. So we're walking through the world as this almost like a distorted person based off of our trauma and calling it an authentic personality. And I've just defined everyone for you, not just people who would say that they've experienced trauma.
Yeah.
Because distress without resolve is not just about the big stuff like, dad leaves. It's about this, what we would look at and label as the smaller stuff. Things like, I grew up in a family who has no space for the way that I feel. So now I have to deny, suppress, and disown all of my feelings and I have to cope with an aspect that is able to mentalize. Now people would describe me as a mental person.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's done that. That's what we call personality.
Yeah. It's like escaping the body in a way. Like I'm gonna take a vacation out of the visceral experience of this and live in my mind and live in this new.
Yes, but you just brought up another element of fragmentation, which is dissociation in and of itself as a coping mechanism to deal with distress.
Yeah.
That we can't find resolve
Yeah.
from. It's like, this is too painful to be in and with because I don't know how to go through the experience and to process it into my being so as to help myself become more with it. So I'm going to pop out of the experience, not experience it actually at all. So we may tell ourselves a story that we have experienced the trauma when in fact we never let ourselves.
Yeah. I've experienced that going through different iterations of therapy that was like largely somatically based. So it was very like not so much let's talk about things, more like let's feel, you know, and use words as kind of a taxi to get you to the buildings.
Yep.
And then once you get to the building, just let the body do the rest. And that's something that I've personally experienced and before having these actual embodied experiences in real time and being able to like feel it actually happen with a therapist, I'd be like, fragmentation, I'm not really sure what that is. But being able to travel back into very specific versions of myself and being like, oh my God, there's actually a 14-year-old boy version of myself, a 6-year-old boy version of myself, and being able to meet that boy and being able to actually communicate with that boy and see that boy. And for me, it was a lot of like head down. It was very like kind of gray background, very like sad, like looking away type experience. And, you know, there's other details I aren't necessarily share within that, but being able to go in and actually provide that boy the support and the feeling and the safety and the sensation and like all the characteristics that he needed to feel totally at ease or or whole or safe to be able to express in that moment.
Yeah.
And being able to actually come back and find those places within yourself and like, you know, defragment. Is that a thing?
Integrate.
Yeah, integrate.
Yeah.
Yeah.